bubbles. So how do we make this dark? The same thing, pressing hard or overlapping, or going to the point where it's very, very fast, and it begins to look kind of when you do it the first time, you can kind of go over it again. This is looking a lot like rocks. What happens if you try different sizes? There's sizes. Like here, as I'm getting lighter with the circles, I pressed less, and I also made less. I also made these larger, so that begins to look lighter. The way of pressing less. So these, as I look at these again, they look kind of all the same. You have white here and dark here, and these kind of look the same. So I could go in again and make these darker. And that starts to begin to look from dark, and it starts to begin to look lighter. And so you could also overlapping made it look darker. Okay. What's another shape that we could use? What about a shape that looks kind of like, maybe that's a shape that kind of looks like scales or little mountains or scales. This let's repeat the whole process again. This can be made darker by overlapping, by pressing harder, by having many more. This over here in the light area could be light by making only a few, by making less, making larger ones, making less. As I'm doing these, as I start getting faster, I can see that I'm starting to make kind of round ones rather than pointy. They became rounder as I was. So again, the same thing. Now kind of darken these up. Darken these up. We have different choices. We have choices of pressing harder, making more, making smaller. The lighter ones, we're pressing lighter, making less, spreading them out, no overlapping. These are overlapping. So what we're doing is we're giving ourselves different ways to go from lighter to darker with different textures, which are we created by making cross hatching, scribbles. We made patterns with circles. The circles kind of look like textures as well. What if you tried something else, like maybe a letter? What are your initials? What's the first letter of your name? I'm going to try one with an L for Laura. That kind of looks like a similar, like the other one, like an angle, like a corner. Goes a lot. Maybe make a few on this one. And put more in here. So this one is like, these L's now begin to look a lot like, kind of like scales, like a dragon or maybe an armadillo or something. Maybe I'm just going to go ahead and just quickly, I got tired of making L's, so I'm going to go ahead and just use hatching and make this darker here. You can still see kind of the L's underneath. And go ahead and go across this way. So on this side here, we still have some more space here for some of these exercises, for some of this practice. So go ahead and one of these boxes here, go ahead and draw your initial. Let's see. I'm going to draw a light L, and I'm going to turn that L into a like a box L. And I'm going to use my lighter press like to draw with. I'm going to draw with in the light area. So instead of drawing immediately very like on the darker side, what I want to actually do for drawing now, from now on, is the first time I draw something, draw as light as I can. So here's let me try to draw one even lighter, an L. So here I drew some L's, that dark one, and I made it into like a fat, a bold L. Now try drawing an angled line down from your letter, and then close that up. So what we did is we made it three-dimensional for the L. Let's say your name starts with an M, and you drew a big capital M, and you want to draw that very light, and then you made that into a like kind of rectangular letters. So on all of them, pull it down, draw it down like this with lines, and you're kind of making this three-dimensional. And try to draw this lightly so that you can. I made a couple of mistakes here. I'm going to go ahead and erase those. Now, once you get it how you want it to be, you can then kind of darken the lines. You want to draw. The point of practicing drawing different lightnesses and darknesses is you want to be able to draw lightly when you first start, so that you can change things. It's easy. It's very hard to erase once you draw very dark. So if you draw this the first time, then this is basically what you have. It's hard to change that. It's a lot easier to erase. This will erase very easily because I drew that very light, but this doesn't erase. The one that I pressed very hard, I won't be able to erase that. So if I drew this out again, so what you're going to do with your letter is on these areas, the one that is on the very bottom, go ahead and fill that up with hatching, and make that hatching to be very dark. You can strengthen some of the lines, draw over them again. Now the one on the side, make hatching on that to be kind of medium. So we've kind of made like a three-dimension of your first initial. Let's go ahead and let's say your M. Do hatching on the bottom, the darkest, and then the one that's on the side, do kind of a medium darkness. So you have three. You have dark, medium, and white on this. If you want to be, and then you can darken these lines. You can also go and like I normally make a few mistakes as I'm doing this, and then I go and use the eraser and kind of take those out. Another thing that you can do is so this is darkest, lightest, and a medium one. Do a very light one on the edge that doesn't have any, that's not touching anything. So on this L, I might do a very, very light as I possibly could on that one. On the M, I might go across on this and do some hatching, a single line hatching on this. I might keep going and crosshatch on the bottom just to make that even darker. And I might crosshatch on this on the side one a little bit, maybe a little, maybe not all the way down. So this is a really good way to practice using light and dark amounts of shading and pressure for. So this is how making something look three-dimensional rather than first you have, you know, an L and then you can make it a bold L and then you can make it a three-dimensional L, and then if you shade it with different amounts of dark and light, very dark, medium dark, very, very light here, then you have something that begins to look very, very three-dimensional at this point. So go ahead and, if you have more space on your paper, fill it up. Maybe write out your whole name and make it into these kinds of three-dimensional letters. Okay, so take a look when you get done with your drawing your name out or just practicing using some of that shading. Go ahead and take out the first thing that you drew earlier, which was a house, a tree, a flower, and your favorite pet or animal, and take a look at it. Now what we're going to do is draw some of these items again using the light and dark. So different lights and darks, and also different ways of shading. So whether you use cross hatching, or using other marks or textures or patterns to fill some of these items up. So go ahead and fold another piece of paper into 4 squares, or you could, if you want, just fold it in half and use a larger amount of area for each item if you want, if you would like to do that, and or an entire sheet of paper, depending on if some of us really like drawing animals, some of us like drawing plants, flowers, or making up our own creatures. So here I have my sheet of paper ready and my pencil, and let's go ahead and start with the house for right now. Another thing that you can do is look at the sheet that you did earlier where you have the different kinds of shading, and just remember how dark you got and how light you got and all the in-betweens. So that's something that you want to have handy to look at for those examples and remember them. So for the house, go ahead. So what I would suggest whenever you do draw anything is look at an example. So you can look at an example of a house, like your own house, or look out the window, look at someone in a book or on the computer, or